So the idea of these progress reports is to give you a more personal angle on how I'm approaching the Painting Lab project, and also, I think, to give you quick, practical demonstrations about painting and drawing based on the questions that you've asked me through the channel. So this week, I'm going to talk about the differences between acrylic paint and oil paint. Is there any way to achieve fine blends and to push and pull details around? So rather than me just standing here and telling you about the differences, I think it's always fairer to show you the differences and to put myself in a position where I'm challenged as well, so that you'll be able to make your own decisions about what paint to choose to make the work that you want to make. So as you can see here, we've got oil paint and we've got acrylic. So to begin with, I'm going to build up a three-dimensional box. And what I've done is I've placed in my color roughly where I want it. And then I've come back with a slightly moist, clean brush and just pushed and pulled at the edges. It means I can block stuff in relatively quickly and messily, and then come back and refine as much as I want to. And I want to show you, you can achieve that with acrylics, but I want to show you the differences. I want to try the same technique here, and it's working okay. You'll see how this begins to change as we get further and further into the painting, I think. Just neaten up this side as well. Already I'm having to work this much more than I did with the oil painting to get stuff to be neat and tidy. And you can imagine painting a cube like this is one thing, but with an acrylic portrait and these kinds of techniques, you've only got a very small window in which to work your paint. So now we're at a stage where we've got two paintings which have worked okay. Our acrylic version took a little bit more work to get here. Our edges were trickier to manipulate, but as you can see, you can do it. So I want to kind of extend beyond this now a little bit. I want to try to create the feeling of a sphere. And because everything in our oil paint version is still completely mobile, we should be able to do that relatively easily. But, well, we'll just see how we go when we get to the acrylic. So to do this, I've got a completely dry brush again, same brush I used to apply the paint, and I'm going to start blending and blurring. And I can push and pull this paint around as much as I want to. Clean brush, and I'm going to carve around the edge here to create a nice crisp form. Okay, so we have a nice sphere kind of shape. It's taken me probably 3 or 4 minutes to put all of that together. Now I can see as I approach this, the paint is already going dull, so I'm going to need a clean brush, liberal amount of water to reactivate this paint. The colour I'm getting is not nuanced in the way that this was. I seem to be just getting one kind of generic caramel colour. The white seems to have dried much more quickly, and also our dark yellow here on this face is completely dry. I'm basically just dealing with one colour here, which means I'll have to reapply more paint. And this fresh paint I'm reapplying is thicker than the paint I've already got on the surface, so it's taking a little bit of work to mix those two together. Let's see if this white is active at all. Well, hardly. Let's see if I can blend that around if I'm just persistent. Yeah, okay, that kind of works, but we've lost the nice bright white. Although I'm getting a reasonable blend, I'm losing a lot of the subtleties and I'm having to apply more paint. The net result of a faster drying time with acrylic is that you have to apply more paint, and you often are not able to adapt what you've already got, whereas our interactions here with the oil paint are all still consistent because everything is just as wet as everything else. Now I do know some painters who are able to paint with acrylic so fast that their paint drying is not really an issue. You can also get mediums to mix with acrylic that will elongate the drying time. All right, now let's level up these techniques. Do you remember this guy? from episode number 2. If you haven't seen episode 2 already, you probably want to go and check it out. So the blending capabilities of oil paint, because it stays wet, was one of the things that made putting this image together much easier. Let's just try exactly the same process again with the acrylic paint, and you can see some of the difficulties that I end up running into. And you may remember from episode 2 that I used a comparator mirror to paint this. So let's just take a look over the top of the comparator mirror. So I'm looking back and forth basically and putting marks in place. So the technique that I showed you with oil paint here is now to get in with my yellow and push the yellow just to the edge of these shapes to refine them, and then after I've refined them, to subtly blend that graduated skin tone. Already I'm feeling that this is a much more clumsy painting than the one I made in episode 2. I would normally with oil paint be able to pick up that red really easily and push it back in against the yellow, but it seems almost, I don't know how to describe it, stiffer. And I have complete empathy with anyone trying to set out on their journey with paint and ending up being frustrated, but I want to show you painting in enough detail on this channel to know that it is actually fairly rarely your fault. I know a bad workman tends to blame their tools, but so often I see rookie painters struggling with the medium, not with their own ability. So I'm applying this yellow about as thinly as I applied my yellow in the original oil painting of this image. But because of that, it's beginning to dry within 10 or 15 seconds, which means that I'm having to paint with a mix of kind of like dry on dry and wet on wet, depending on where the paint wants to dry and where it doesn't. So I'm fighting the paint really to get any of this to happen. And if we take a look at the way that my oil paint version of this behaved, I mean, look how much more efficiently I'm able to put stuff in and move paint around. I'm actually getting quite nice scumbling marks. Actually, there are some subtleties in the skin tones here, which the acrylic, well, it's a different technique, but it's doing it favors actually, I would say. So this is a very much rougher, more approximate finish that I'm getting. Can I get the details of this nose? I think this is a really important part about what we do at Painting Lab. I've got to be challenging myself. Because if you guys are going to approach this, many of you with very little experience with drawing and painting, and I'm going to claim to help you, you should at the very least see me struggling and tying myself in knots. So I'm having to make all sorts of compromises with the technique I'd normally use. Trying to draw in that shadow that dips around the edge of his chin is not at all what I'd normally want to do. So 4 colours and acrylic paint over about 5 minutes. I think my verdict is that this is a very much rougher technique, but still, you know, quite useful. So we can see really that what we're ending up with here is fairly passable actually. It's quite loose in comparison to our oil painting, and I didn't get the satisfaction of being able to really tighten things up, but there's certainly a nice quality to this, which Caravaggio didn't go for, but you know, Monet did. So this is literally a case of different strokes for different folks. So that is the end of another update. I hope that this slightly deeper dive than usual has answered questions you might have about oil paint and acrylic and which is best for you. If you found this video interesting, you can go to paintinglab.com, of course, sign up to our mailing list, and that means that you're part of this experiment. I'm going to be back next week with an experiment that will involve you and me painting together from the same image. So until then, good luck with your drawing and painting, and I'll see you next time.